We value every single one of you and would love to know where you're tuning in from right now. Drop a comment and let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. The leather-bound wine menu trembled slightly in Michael Barrett's hands as he watched his wife, Emily, of 20 years, texting under the white tablecloth. The soft glow from her phone screen reflected off her makeup, casting shadows that made her appear older than her 43 years. He set the menu down with deliberate care, noting how Emily didn't even glance up at the sound. "I was thinking of ordering the 1982 Bordeaux," Michael said, his deep voice carrying effortlessly across the intimate table. "It's the year we met at Harvard." "Oh, whatever you think is best, darling," Emily replied, her fingers still dancing across her phone screen, her wedding ring catching the light from the chandelier. Michael studied her, with the same sharp focus he had used to build Barrett Medical Technologies from a small startup to a billion-dollar company. The signs had been there for months. Late nights at the office, a new wardrobe, and an unexpected interest in tennis, his brother Nathan's favorite sport. The final piece clicked when Nathan began missing their weekly matches and board meetings. A young waiter with carefully styled hair and an eager smile approached. "Have you decided on the wine, Mr. Barrett?" "The Chateau Lafite Rothschild, 1982, Michael replied, keeping his composure while Emily's phone buzzed again. "And please tell Chef David I appreciate him opening the restaurant for us on a Sunday. Our 20th anniversary deserves something special." This at least made Emily look up. A flash of something guilt? Annoyance? Crossed her face before she forced a smile. 20 years. Can you believe it, darling? "I'm starting to," Michael thought, but outwardly he smiled, though the expression didn't quite reach his eyes. The restaurant around them buzzed with the quiet efficiency typical of an establishment catering to Silicon Valley elites. Through the large windows, the city lights shimmered like stars fallen to earth. "Nathan sends his regrets," Emily said suddenly, her French accent slightly more pronounced than usual, a tell that Michael had learned meant she was nervous. "He's still working on the software launch for the neural interface technology. You know how dedicated he is." "Dedicated," Michael repeated, tasting the word like a sommelier sampling a questionable vintage. "Yes, he's been very dedicated lately. Missing our weekly tennis games. Working late." He paused, watching her reaction. "Often in the PR department, I hear." Emily's laugh was too bright, too quick. "Well, of course. The neural interface technology launch is the biggest thing Barrett Medical has ever done. We need perfect coordination between development and PR." The waiter returned with the wine, performing the ritual of presentation and tasting with practiced grace. Michael approved with a nod, watching as Emily's glass was filled. She immediately lifted it and took a larger sip than the expensive vintage warranted. "To 20 years," Michael said, raising his glass. "And to honesty between brothers." Emily's hand trembled slightly as she clinked her glass against his before her phone buzzed again. This time, Michael caught a glimpse of the message preview. "Need to see you tonight. Crucial about the launch." "Something important?" Michael asked mildly. "Just work," Emily said quickly, too quickly. "You know how it is before a major launch." The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced small talk and long silences. Emily barely touched her steak, pushing it around her plate while constantly checking her phone. Michael ate methodically, each bite carefully chewed and swallowed, the knot in his throat tightening. He had built his empire on attention to detail, and now those same skills were showing him exactly how his marriage was falling apart. As they drove home in Michael's Tesla Model S, a car chosen for its quiet efficiency, unlike Nathan's flashy Italian sports cars, Emily grew increasingly agitated. "I need to go back to the office," she said as they pulled into their circular driveway. "There's some last-minute press release work for the launch." "At 11 p.m.? Michael asked, his voice steady, though his grip on the steering wheel tightened. "The European market's opening soon. We need everything perfect." Emily was already unbuckling her seatbelt. "Don't wait up, darling." Michael watched her hurry to her own car, not bothering to change out of her evening dress. As her taillights disappeared down the drive, he pulled out his phone and opened a secure app few knew existed. Years in cybersecurity had taught him the importance of preparation, and the tracking software he had installed weeks ago showed Emily's car heading not toward the office, but to Nathan's downtown penthouse. Inside his home office, Michael sat in the darkness, the only light coming from his multiple monitors. One screen displayed the company's internal communications, another showed security camera feeds, and the third displayed Nathan's recent financial transactions. The house felt empty without their son, Lucas, who was away at boarding school. Michael had initially resisted sending him there, but now he was grateful his son wasn't there to witness what was coming. At 16, Noah was already showing signs of inheriting his father's analytical mind, though lately he had been distant, often talking more about Uncle Lucas's exciting projects than his father's work. At midnight, James's phone pinged with an alert. Claire was making a call from Lucas's apartment. Through the building's security system, installed by a subsidiary of Barrett Medical, James could hear her words clearly. "Once the software launches, everything changes," she whispered eagerly. James suspects nothing. He's too focused on his precious code to see what's happening right in front of him. A man's voice responded, too distant to hear clearly, but James recognized his brother's laugh. James leaned back in his chair, his face illuminated by the blue glow of the monitors. He opened his private server, the one even Lucas didn't know about, and began documenting everything. Years of practice kept his hands steady as he typed, even as his world tilted on its axis. The next morning, Barrett Medical's offices buzzed with pre-launch energy. James walked through the glass-walled corridors, nodding to employees who scrambled to appear busy as he passed. His custom-made suit and carefully composed expression gave no hint of his sleepless night. "Good morning, Mr. Barrett." His assistant, Olivia Grant, fell in a step beside him. She had been with him for 15 years, one of the few people he trusted completely. "Your brother called to reschedule today's board meeting again. Did he give a reason?" Olivia hesitated. "Ms. Barrett, Claire said he's meeting with potential investors." "I see," James replied, stopping at his office door. "Olivia, I need you to pull some files for me." Discreetly. Everything related to the neural interface technology project, security protocols, and get me David from legal. "Of course." Olivia paused. "Sir, is everything all right?" James's smile was genuine this time. "Just being thorough, Olivia. We've worked too hard to leave anything to chance." Throughout the day, James maintained his routine with mechanical precision. He reviewed code, met with department heads, and approved marketing materials. If he noticed how Claire's office remained empty until noon, or how Lucas's signature was missing from crucial documents, he gave no sign. The next 2 days passed in a similar fashion. James gathered data, watched, and waited. He saw how Lucas swaggered through the offices, accepting congratulations for the upcoming launch as if he had written the code himself. He noticed how Claire touched Lucas's arm when they thought no one was looking, how they disappeared into conference rooms for emergency meetings. He also saw what they didn't: the worried looks from longtime employees, the whispered conversations that stopped when either approached, the way Olivia's lips tightened every time Lucas's name was mentioned. On the third day, exactly 72 hours before the scheduled launch, James was reviewing security footage in his home office when he heard Claire's heels clicking down the hallway. Her perfume, different from her usual scent, preceded her into the room. "We need to talk," she announced, not bothering with a greeting. Her voice carried none of its usual warmth. James turned slowly in his chair. "Do we?" "Don't be difficult, James." Claire strode to his desk, her designer heels striking the hardwood floor like judges' gavels. "You're a smart man. You must have noticed things are different." "Different?" James repeated, his voice neutral. "Like my brother missing board meetings? Or my wife coming home at 3 a.m. smelling like his cologne?" A flash of surprise crossed Claire's face before being replaced by something harder, more calculated. She reached in her designer handbag and pulled out a thick envelope. "Here's how it's going to be," she declared, tossing the envelope onto his desk. Legal documents spilled out, divorce papers, James noted with clinical detachment. "Lucas needs me during his divorce. I'm moving into his penthouse, and we'll spend our nights however we want. He really needs this." James reached for his phone, but Claire's laugh stopped him. A sharp, cruel sound he'd never heard from her before. "Don't bother calling the family," she said, triumph in her voice. They've known about us for months. They think we're perfect together. The visionary and the woman who truly appreciates him. She leaned forward, her expensive perfume cloying in the enclosed space. Face it, James. You were always the boring brother. All those years of careful planning, conservative investments, building things slowly. Lucas understands vision, passion. He's going to take Barrett Medical in directions you never dreamed of. James's face remained impassive as he looked at the woman he'd spent 20 years with. Is that what he told you? That he has vision? He doesn't just tell me. He shows me. Claire's smile was sharp enough to cut. Did you know he's been working on partnerships that could triple the company's value? Of course not. You're too busy checking and rechecking code like a glorified programmer. And these partnerships, James said carefully, they wouldn't happen to involve our Chinese competitors, would they? For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Claire's face. I don't know what you're talking about. No. James turned one of his monitors toward her. On the screen, a series of emails was displayed, all in Mandarin. My boring attention to detail includes learning Mandarin, Claire. Useful for international business and for reading correspondence about selling proprietary software. Claire's composure cracked slightly before she rallied. You're paranoid. This is exactly why Lucas needs to take a larger role. You see conspiracies everywhere. It's not paranoia if they're really plotting against you. James's voice remained calm, almost gentle. Tell me, does Lucas know you've been documenting his cocaine use for the past year? Or that you've been photographing his meetings with certain individuals the SEC would be very interested in? The color drained from Claire's face. How did you, the same way I know about the offshore account you opened last month? The one you think I can't trace. James stood slowly. You forgot something crucial, Claire. Before I was CEO, before I built this company, I worked in cybersecurity. The boring brother knows how to watch the watchers. You're bluffing, Claire snapped, but her hand trembled as she clutched her bag. And even if you're not, it doesn't matter. The family supports us. They understand that Lucas and I love each other. James's laugh was soft, but held no humor. The way you loved me when my first company failed? When Lucas was living in our pool house, borrowing money he never repaid? Or the way you love him now, when you think he's about to become CEO? Claire took a step back, then seemed to remember herself. She straightened, her chin lifting. Sign the papers, James. Don't make this uglier than it needs to be. Think about Noah. I always think about Noah. James sat back down, his movements deliberate. That's why. I'm going to give you one chance, Claire. One chance to walk away quietly, with a generous settlement outlined in our prenuptial agreement. The agreement you called paranoid, remember? Or what? Claire's voice dripped with contempt. You'll try to ruin us? Good luck. Lucas has copies of everything. One wrong move from you, and certain rumors about your stability start circulating. How do you think the board will react to concerns about their CEO's mental state right before the biggest launch in company history? James simply looked at her, his expression unchanged. You should go, Pat, Claire. Lucas is waiting. You're pathetic, she spat. Sitting there, acting so calm when your life is falling apart. This is why I'm leaving. You can't even fight for what's yours. She stormed out, leaving the divorce papers scattered across his desk. James waited until he heard her car start before picking up his phone. Olivia, implementation code Theta 9. And please clear my schedule for the evening. I need to visit my parents. The drive to his parents' Victorian home in Pacific Heights took longer than usual, giving James time to process what he'd learned. His mother's garden, meticulously maintained for 40 years, seemed to mock the family's disarray with its perfect order. Inside, he found what he expected. His parents in the living room, his sister Kate pacing by the window. They looked up with varying degrees of guilt as he entered. James, his mother started. We can explain. Can you? James remained standing, looking at the family photos on the mantel. Can you explain lending Lucas money for months? Or covering for Claire's absences at family events? Or maybe you can explain why my teenage son is being told that his uncle will be a better father figure. Kate stopped pacing. How did you know? James turned to face them. I know everything. The loans. The lies. The late-night meetings. I know about Lucas's fake divorce proceedings. Did you know he's been divorced for 2 years? I know about the money he's embezzled, the secrets he's sold. I know how he and Claire laughed about manipulating all of you. That's not possible, his father protested. Lucas said the money was for research. He showed us the proposal. Forgeries, James said quietly. Like the documents he used to convince you I was planning to sell the company. Like the stories he told Noah about. Me abandoning projects that could help people. His mother began to cry. He seemed so passionate about his ideas. And Claire said you were becoming distant, paranoid. Of course she did. James's voice held no accusation, just tired certainty. They played their parts well. The charismatic brother, the concerned wife, all worried about boring, obsessive James. Oh God, Kate whispered. The things we said to you, the way we treated you. James watched his family absorb the truth, seeing the moment realization dawned on each face. He thought of Noah, away at school, believing his father cared more about profits than progress. He thought of Lucas and Claire, probably celebrating their triumph right now. What are you going to do? His father asked finally. James straightened his cuffs, a gesture so familiar, so unchanged in this altered world. What I always do, Dad. Pay attention to the details. As he drove home that night, James's phone lit up with a text from Claire. Move my things out. Hope you enjoy rattling around that big house alone. Lucas says you have 24 hours to sign the papers before things get complicated. James didn't respond. Instead, he pulled into his garage and walked through his quiet house to his office. The monitors glowed in welcome as he sat down, his fingers moving across the keyboards with practiced efficiency. On one screen, security footage showed Lucas and Claire entering his penthouse, champagne in hand. On another, lines of code scrolled past the neural interface technology project's true version, not the compromised one Lucas thought he'd stolen. The third displayed a series of encrypted emails to carefully chosen recipients. James Vincent smiled in the blue light of his screens and began to type. The server room hummed with the quiet efficiency of well-maintained machines, its climate-controlled atmosphere a sharp contrast to the emotional storm of the past few days. James Vincent sat alone in the dim blue glow of multiple monitors, his fingers dancing across keyboards as he followed digital breadcrumbs through Vincent Medical's secure servers. Found you, little brother, he murmured, his eyes narrowing at the screen. A series of encrypted communications flickered past, emails and file transfers to an IP address in Shenzhen. Lucas had been careful, but not careful enough. He'd used his executive override codes to access sensitive neural interface technology documentation, leaving tiny digital fingerprints that only someone with James's background would notice. Olivia Chin appeared at the server room door, her usual professional demeanor tinged with concern. Sir, the IT team is asking questions about the Level 7 security Skinu initiated. Tell them it's a routine pre-launch protocol. James's eyes never left the screen. And Olivia, flag any attempts to access the development servers from Lucas or Claire's credentials. Don't block them, just log everything. Of course. Olivia hesitated. Mr. Vincent, Miss Haas's office called again. They say it's urgent. James allowed himself a small smile. Ginger Haas's reputation for handling tech industry divorces was well earned, but she'd have to wait. First, he needed proof that would stand up in both corporate and criminal courts. As if on cue, his phone buzzed with a message from Lucas. Board meeting tomorrow. Time to discuss your retirement, big brother. For the good of the company. James didn't respond. Instead, he pulled up another window, this one showing email correspondence between Claire's PR department and several tech journalists. She'd been laying groundwork for months, planting subtle hints about his increasing isolation and obsessive behavior. One draft article, scheduled for release after the launch, already had a quote from Lucas about his deep concern for his brother's well-being. Amateur hour, James muttered, copying the files to his secure server. In the PR world, a paper trail was as good as a signed confession. The next morning, Vincent Medical's gleaming headquarters buzzed with pre-launch energy. James moved through the corridors with deliberate calm, noting how employees quickly looked away when he passed. Claire's whisper campaign had been effective, They were already treating him like a man on his way out. Lucas's corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern art, screamed new money. He looked up from his desk with a predator's smile as James entered. James, just the man I wanted to see. Lucas's designer suit couldn't quite hide his stockier build. He'd always resented being the shorter brother. Have you looked over those retirement papers I sent? Actually, James settled into a chair, his posture relaxed. I've been reviewing some interesting server logs. Care to explain why you've been accessing neural interface technology source code at 3 a.m.? Lucas's smile flickered. As CFO, I have every right to review company assets. And the emails to Shinjin? That's just what? Market research. Careful, brother. Lucas leaned forward, his act of friendliness cracking. Claire's documented your paranoid accusations. One wrong move, and the board sees evidence of your deteriorating mental state. Is that how you want to end your career? In a psychiatric evaluation? James's laugh was genuine. You always were terrible at chess, Lucas. Too focused on the pieces in front of you. Never seeing the whole board. What's that supposed to mean? It means I know about the offshore accounts, the fake divorce proceedings, the cocaine habit you think you're hiding. James stood slowly. It means I have recordings of you and Claire planning to sell our technology to competitors. And it means you're still thinking 3 moves ahead while I'm playing an entirely different game. The color drained from Lucas's face. You're bluffing. Am I? Check your primary offshore account. The one in the Caymans. Lucas's fingers flew across his keyboard. James watched his brother's expression shift from confidence to confusion to fear. What did you do? Lucas's voice cracked. Nothing. Yet. James straightened his tie. The neural interface technology launch is in 3 days. A lot can happen in 3 days. He left Lucas staring at his computer screen, sweat beading on his forehead. In the elevator, James checked his watch. Right on schedule. The boardroom was already full when James arrived for the emergency meeting he'd quietly arranged. 8 pairs of eyes watched him take his seat at the head of the table. These were old money people, venture capitalists, and tech veterans who'd backed Vincent Medical from its early days. People who understood the value of stability. Thank you for coming on such short notice. James began, his voice measured. What I'm about to show you requires absolute discretion. For the next hour, he laid out his evidence. Emails proving Lucas's contact with Chinese competitors. Financial records showing systematic theft disguised as research costs. Recordings of Claire discussing plans to blame data leaks on James's instability. My God, whispered Jonathan Chun, the longest-serving board member. How long have you known? Long enough to protect the company. James brought up a final document on the display screen. This is the real neural interface technology source code. What Lucas thinks he's been stealing is a sophisticated decoy. The board members exchanged glances. These were people who'd built their fortunes on recognizing calculated risks. What do you need from us? Asked Victoria Reeves, her silver hair catching the light. Hey! Delay of the launch. Officially, for security audit. Unofficially, to let certain interested parties complete their investigations. Understanding dawned on their faces. Several nodded appreciatively. All in favor? Jonathan asked. The vote was unanimous. James's next stop was Ginger Haas's office in the financial district. The lawyer's reputation for ruthlessness was reflected in her minimalist office. Steel, glass, and sharp edges. You're a surprise, James, Ginger said, reviewing his evidence. Most men in your position let emotion cloud their judgment. But she gestured at the files. This is beautiful. Clinical. I prefer thorough. Thorough works. Ginger's smile was razor sharp. Your prenup is solid. But with this evidence of corporate conspiracy, we can make sure Claire walks away with nothing but regrets. And Lucas? Corporate espionage. Wire fraud. Conspiracy. He's looking at federal time. Unless he runs. James nodded. He'll run. It's what he does. Back at the office, James found Olivia waiting with more news. Sir, Lucas has been trying to access the development servers. And Claire's been calling emergency meetings with the PR team. Right on schedule. James checked his watch. How many people have they contacted? 17 journalists, 3 industry analysts, and a psychiatric consultant. Good. Let them dig their hole deeper. James sat at his desk, the weight of 20 years of marriage and brotherhood settling around him like a familiar coat. Olivia, implement protocol Omega. It's time to spring the trap. The next 2 days passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Lucas grew increasingly desperate as his access to various systems mysteriously failed. Claire's attempts to plant stories about James's mental state met with unexpected skepticism from journalists who'd received anonymous evidence of her affair and conspiracy. The morning of the launch dawned clear and cold. Vincent Medical's auditorium was packed with press, investors, and employees. Lucas and Claire sat in the front row, their manufactured confidence beginning to crack around the edges. James took the stage to enthusiastic applause. He looked every inch the successful CEO in his perfectly tailored suit, his silver hair adding gravitas to his appearance. "Thank you all for coming," he began. Vincent Medical has always prided itself on innovation and integrity, which is why today's announcement may come as a surprise. Lucas shifted in his seat. Claire's knuckles whitened around her tablet. "In light of certain security concerns, we're implementing a comprehensive audit of all our projects, including the Neural Interface Technology Initiative." The audience murmured. James held up a hand for silence. "Our commitment to excellence requires us to be certain that every aspect of our technology is protected. To that end, we're cooperating fully with federal authorities in an investigation into potential corporate espionage." As if on cue, suits appeared at every exit. Lucas's face went ashen as he recognized the FBI badges. "Additionally," James continued, his voice carrying clearly over the growing whispers, "all executive accounts have been temporarily frozen pending this investigation." Claire was already fumbling with her phone, presumably discovering that her access to the company's accounts and their joint accounts had been suspended. "This is insane." Lucas stood, his composure finally cracking. "James's mental state has been deteriorating for months. Ask anyone. He's been making paranoid accusations, seeing conspiracies everywhere." James smiled slightly. "Interesting choice of words, Lucas. Would you like to explain these emails to our competitors in Shenzhen? Or should we ask Claire about the PR campaign she's been preparing to explain away the theft of our technology?" The room erupted in chaos. Journalists shouted questions as FBI agents moved forward. Lucas looked wildly around before bolting for a side exit. He made it 3 steps before security stopped him. Claire stood frozen, her carefully crafted world crumbling around her. "You can't do this," she whispered as James passed her. "They'll know everything by dinner," James finished quietly. "Including you. Especially you." He watched as she crumpled in her seat, mascara tracking down her cheeks. The woman who'd shared his bed for 20 years, who'd thought him too boring to notice her betrayal, finally seeing him clearly. In his office later that day, James sat with Olivia, watching the fallout unfold on multiple screens. Lucas was in custody, already offering to cooperate in exchange for leniency. Claire had locked herself in her office, presumably calling the divorce lawyers she'd thought would be destroying James's life instead of hers. "Sir," Olivia said softly, "your son is on line 1. James picked up the phone, bracing himself. "Dad." His son's voice cracked. "Uncle Lucas. He told me you were going to shut down the medical research, that you only cared about profits. But I just saw the news." "I know, son." James's voice remained gentle. "We have a lot to talk about. Can I come home? I mean, not just for a weekend. I want to transfer back to prep school here." "Of course." James felt something tight in his chest loosen slightly. "We'll arrange it tomorrow." After hanging up, James stood at his office window, watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. Behind him, the monitor showed Lucas being led away in handcuffs, Claire facing a barrage of reporters, and the company's stock price holding steady despite the scandal. Olivia appeared at his door again. "Sir? The board would like to know if you're still planning to attend tonight's emergency session." James straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the window. "Of course. We have a company to run." As he walked to the boardroom, employees stopped to watch him pass. But this time, their gazes held respect rather than speculation. The boring brother, the careful planner, the man they'd underestimated, had shown his true nature. The trap had sprung perfectly, but James knew this was just the beginning. There would be court battles, PR wars, and family wounds to heal. But he'd built his empire on attention to detail, on seeing the long game. And he was very, very good at chess. Vincent Medical's boardroom crackled with tension as board members sat in leather chairs, reviewing the evidence spread before them. The morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows illuminated printed emails, financial records, and surveillance transcripts, a paper trail of betrayal that led directly to Lucas Vincent's office. The scope of this? Jonathan Chon said, setting down a particularly damning document. He wasn't just selling secrets, he was trying to hollow out the company from the inside. James Vincent stood at the head of the table, his posture relaxed but commanding. The neural interface technology source code he attempted to steal was a sophisticated decoy. The real project remained secure. Victoria Reeves, her silver hair gleaming, leaned forward. And you're certain about his involvement with the Chinese competitors? The evidence speaks for itself. James pressed a button on his tablet, and a recording filled the room. Lucas's voice, slightly slurred. Once the launch happens, we'll be set. The buyers already have the preliminary specs. James is too busy checking code to notice what's right under his nose. Claire's laugh. The board will believe anything once they see my documentation of his mental decline. Poor paranoid James, seeing conspiracies everywhere. James stopped the recording. There's more. Hours of it. The board. Members exchanged glances. These were people who'd built fortunes by recognizing threats and opportunities. They understood exactly what they were hearing. I move for an immediate vote on Lucas Vincent's position as CFO, Jonathan said, his voice hard. All in favor? 8 hands rose without hesitation. The vote is unanimous, Victoria declared. Per the company charter's Article 7, Section 3, which James so presciently updated last year, Lucas's shares must be sold back to the company at their original purchase price, a fraction of their current value. Jonathan added with grim satisfaction. James allowed himself a small smile. Olivia, please escort the FBI agents in. They'll want to see this. The corporate fallout was swift and absolute. News of Lucas's arrest spread through the building like wildfire. Employees gathered in clusters, whispering as federal agents carried boxes of evidence from his office. Claire barricaded herself in the PR department, frantically trying to salvage her carefully crafted narrative. Her phone calls to journalists went unreturned. They'd all received anonymous packets documenting her role in the conspiracy. "You can't do this," she screamed when security came to escort her out. "I built this company's image. I controlled the narrative. The truth isn't a narrative, Claire," James said quietly, watching from the doorway. "It's just the truth." That evening, James's Tesla pulled up to his parents' Victorian home in Pacific Heights. The family meeting he'd called couldn't wait, not with reporters already circling. His mother opened the door, her face drawn. "James, what's happening?" "We saw the news. Let's talk inside." James carried a laptop under his arm. "Is everyone here?" They gathered in the living room. His parents, his sister Kate, and Jay, who'd flown in from boarding school. The same room where they'd once conspired behind his back, now transformed into a court of reckoning. James opened his laptop, connected it to the TV. "Before we begin, I want you to listen to something." Derek's voice filled the room. "Mom and Dad are so easy to play. A few tears about research costs, and they're writing checks. They never verify anything, just like they never verified James was trying to block the medical research." Claire's voice followed. "And Jay, God, that kid is gullible. Uncle Derek understands the future. Your dad only cares about money. He believes everything we tell him." Their laughter, cruel and clear, cut through the room. James's mother began to cry. His father's face had gone gray. Kate stared at her hands, unable to meet anyone's eyes. "There's more," James said, his voice gentle but firm. "Derek's been divorced for 2 years. The proceedings he used to justify the affair were fabricated. The money you lent him, it went to offshore accounts and illicit activity." "No," his father whispered. "He showed us the court documents." "Forged," James replied, pulling up images on the screen. Here are the real divorce records. And here are his bank statements, showing where your money really went. Jay stood abruptly, his teenage face twisted with betrayal. I trusted him. He said you were blocking research that could help people. James finished, while he was trying to sell our technology to competitors. He never cared about helping people, Jay. Only himself. The truth landed like body blows. James watched his family absorb each revelation, seeing the moment their support for Derek and Claire crumbled under the weight of evidence. The things we said to you, Kate whispered. The way we treated you is in the past, James said firmly. But you needed to know the truth. All of it. Later that week, James sat in Ginger Haas's office, reviewing divorce proceedings. The lawyer's smile was predatory as she outlined their position. Claire's trying to claim half the company's value, Ginger said. But her documented conspiracy makes that impossible. The prenup you insisted on? It's ironclad. And with the criminal charges pending, she gets nothing. James finished for her. Less than nothing. She'll be lucky to stay out of prison. News came the next morning. Derek had fled. His passport had been flagged at Shanghai International Airport. He's running to his buyers, Sarah reported, standing in James's office. But they won't be there, James finished. I made sure of that. Weeks passed. The company stabilized. The real neural interface technology project proceeded under heightened security. James managed the crisis with his usual methodical precision, his public image transforming from boring brother to tech industry vigilante. Then came the email from Shanghai. Derek, desperate. The buyers disappeared. Accounts emptied. Claire's furious. We're living in a one-room apartment, and she won't stop crying. Please, James, help us come home. James archived the email without replying. A year later, James stood at a podium, announcing Vincent Medical's official launch of the neural interface technology software. The audience applauded as he outlined plans to donate millions to medical research. Jay stood beside him, home from his first year of medical school, his face proud as he watched his father. Their relationship had emerged stronger from the crucible of betrayal. In his office that evening, James looked at the wedding photo still sitting on his desk. Claire smiled out at him, young and beautiful, before ambition had twisted her into something unrecognizable. Sarah appeared at his door. Sir, your dinner reservation is in 30 minutes. And there's a message from Shanghai. Archive it with the others. James straightened his tie and checked his reflection in the window. Outside, San Francisco glittered in the dusk, as bright and hard as ambition itself. The boring brother had won, not through dramatic gestures or grand confrontations, but through patience, precision, and attention to detail. Just as he'd built his company, just as he'd protected it. He picked up the wedding photo, started to drop it in the shredder, then stopped. No, it would stay on his desk, not for sentiment, but as a reminder that sometimes the quiet ones, the careful ones, the ones others underestimate, are the most dangerous of all. In a small apartment in Shanghai, Derek taught English to bored businessmen while fighting extradition. Claire worked at a tourist agency, her designer clothes long since sold. Her dreams of wealth and power reduced to sharing instant noodles in a kitchenette. Sometimes late at night, they talked about what went wrong, about how they'd misread James so completely. But by then it was far too late. The boring brother had changed the game while they were still learning the rules. Extended epilogue. 5 years later, the Shanghai summer was oppressive. The kind of heat that turned tiny apartments into ovens. Claire Vincent, now using her maiden name Dubois, stood at a grimy window, watching tourists shuffle past on the street below. Her once manicured hands were raw from cleaning hotel rooms, her designer wardrobe replaced by discount store uniforms. The extradition papers came through, Derek announced, slumping onto their worn couch. Claire's English teaching job barely covered rent, and the legal fees had drained what little they'd salvaged. They're processing the request, Derek said, his tone thick with disbelief. Claire didn't turn. Derek's laugh was bitter. 5 years, and he's still hunting us. The boring brother never forgets. Their life had become a cautionary tale in Silicon Valley. Occasional news stories tracked their fall. The former CFO teaching basic English to children, the PR executive turned hotel maid. Their love story had crumbled under the weight of poverty and mutual recrimination. Meanwhile, Vincent Medical Technologies had soared. The neural interface technology, software revolutionized medical data processing, earning accolades and billions in revenue. James's donation of millions to medical research garnered international praise, his reputation transforming from careful executive to visionary philanthropist. 10 years later, the Vincent Medical Technologies headquarters had expanded, now occupying 3 gleaming towers in San Francisco's skyline. James Vincent, his hair now fully silver, stood at his office window, watching the sunset paint the bay in gold. "Dad!" Jay Vincent entered, his white coat exchanged for a business suit. After finishing medical school, he joined the company's research division, eventually rising to chief medical officer. The new neural mapping project results just came in. "It's even better than we hoped." James smiled at his son, no longer the manipulated teenager, but a confident man of 28. "Your mother called again," he said quietly. From Paris. After 3 years in Shanghai, Claire had left Derek, using her French citizenship to escape to Paris. She worked as a tour guide, living in a small apartment in the unfashionable 20th arrondissement. Her monthly emails to Jay went unanswered. Derek hadn't fared better. The Chinese competitors he'd tried to sell to had blacklisted him after James's warning. He moved between Asian cities, teaching English and dodging extradition, his charismatic swagger replaced by desperate survival. "I delete her emails," Jay said firmly. "She and Derek showed us who they really were. I learned that from you." 15 years later, James Vincent, now in his 70s but still sharp as ever, sat in the company's main auditorium. The occasion was historical. Vincent Medical Technologies was launching its most ambitious project yet, a neural interface that could help paralyzed patients regain movement. In the front row sat familiar faces. Sarah Chin, now CEO while James served as chairman, her loyalty rewarded with a meteoric rise. Victoria Reeves and Jonathan Chun, still on the board, their faith in James's leadership vindicated many times over. Kate, his sister, managed the company's charitable foundation, turning her guilt over past betrayal into tireless work helping others. Their parents had passed away years ago, but not before seeing the full scope of their younger son's deception and their elder son's triumph. The presentation began with a video. Patients walking again, families reunited, lives transformed. The neural interface technology had evolved far beyond its origins, becoming something truly revolutionary. A news alert flashed on James's phone. Former Vincent Medical CFO Derek Vincent found dead in Bangkok hotel. Apparent suicide. James quietly archived the message. Derek's final years had been a downward spiral. The extradition threats, the poverty, the burning bridges. In the end, the charismatic brother had died alone, his schemes long since unraveled. 20 years later, the medical technology world gathered in Stockholm to witness James Vincent, now 80, receive the Nobel Prize in Medicine. The neural interface technology had evolved into a system that helped millions, from paralysis patients to those with neurological disorders. Jay sat in the front row with his wife and children, beaming with pride. He'd helped develop the final iterations of the technology, proving himself not just as James's son, but as a brilliant researcher in his own right. Claire watched the ceremony on a small TV in her Paris apartment, aged and alone. Her attempts at reconciliation had met with silence. The prenup she'd mocked had left her with nothing. Her conspiracies had blocked any corporate career, and her beauty had faded with time. She survived on a small pension, writing unsent letters to the son who would never forgive her. 25 years later, the final chapter, James Vincent died peacefully in his sleep at 85, leaving behind a legacy that transformed medicine. The company he'd built, the lives he'd changed, the family he'd protected, all stood as testament to the power of patience, precision, and principled leadership. His funeral drew thousands. Tech leaders, medical pioneers, and grateful patients came to honor the man who'd turned betrayal into triumph. Jay delivered the eulogy, speaking of his father's quiet strength, his strategic brilliance, and his unwavering moral compass. In a small Paris apartment, Claire read the news of James's death. The obituaries painted him as a visionary, a medical technology pioneer, a devoted father. None mentioned her name. She was a footnote, a cautionary tale, forgotten by the world that had once been her stage. The Vincent Medical Technologies headquarters raised a new building, the James Vincent Center for Neural Research. In the lobby, beside his portrait, sat a familiar wedding photo, not as a memorial to lost love, but as James had intended. A reminder that greatness often comes quietly, that true strength lies not in dramatic gestures but in patient, methodical execution. J. Vincent took his father's place as chairman, leading the company into new frontiers of medical technology. Sarah Chun continued as CEO, their partnership echoing the loyalty and trust that had defined James's leadership. The neural interface technology evolved into a global standard, helping millions walk, communicate, and live fuller lives. Hospitals worldwide used Vincent Medical Systems, the company's name becoming synonymous with medical innovation. Kate Vincent Chin expanded the charitable foundation's reach, building hospitals in underserved communities. Each bore a plaque with James's favorite quote: "Success is not about being underestimated. It's about being underestimated only once." Legacy. James Vincent's story became a case study at Harvard Business School on strategic leadership and corporate governance. Students analyzed how the quiet brother outmaneuvered betrayal through meticulous planning and unwavering resolve. The company he built continued to thrive, its culture shaped by his principles: attention to detail, patient strategy, and ethical leadership. The Vincent name became associated not with scandal, but with innovation and integrity. Derek and Claire's betrayal, meant to destroy him, instead revealed his true strength. Their attempt to paint him as paranoid and unstable backfired, exposing their own moral bankruptcy. In the end, James Vincent passed away as he had lived, on his own terms, his legacy secure, his principles vindicated. The quiet brother, the careful planner, the man they underestimated, had written his name into medical and business history. And in corporate boardrooms, tech startups, and business schools, his story taught an important lesson. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is not the loudest or most charismatic, but the quiet one who sees the whole board and plays the long game. The wedding photo remained displayed at the company's headquarters, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as proof that true strength often comes disguised as caution, that real power lies not in bold strikes, but in patient strategy. James Vincent's epitaph, chosen by Jay, simply read, "He saw the whole game while others played their opening moves." It was enough. It had always been enough.